handcuffed in her own neighborhood. An FBI agent humiliated in broad daylight, not because of a crime, but because of the color of her skin. Phones recorded, the town watched, and in a single morning, Maplewood went from a quiet suburb to ground zero for a national reckoning. This is the story of Agent Naira Cole, the woman who turned her arrest into a movement that changed her town and inspired a country to run toward justice. If you believe stories like this matter, make sure to hit that subscribe button, not just to support this channel, but to keep these voices alive. Dawn slid into Halcyon Ridge like a whisper, pouring pale light through the pine tops until the gravel trail by the lake looked like a page waiting to be written on. Every pebble caught the water's shimmer. Every ripple carried the promise of a new day. Naira Cole rolled her ankles, stretched her hips, then let her first stride fall into place. Always the same ritual ease and slow, let her breath find rhythm. Wait for her heart to answer. Ready. She loved this hill because every morning it felt untouched, unclaimed. No horns, no emails, no heavy doors slamming shut. Just the steady sound of sneakers against earth, the resin smell of pine, the jitter of tiny sparrows hiding in the brush. Her mother used to say, "You don't run to escape. You run to bring the world back where it belongs." Naira believed it. Though she'd learned the hard way sometimes to keep things in place. You had to put your own body on the line. The lake wore a thin scarf of mist that morning. Across the path, the bakery owner was unlatching her shop's metal gate, a paper sack dangling from her hand. Later, Naira promised herself, after her fourth loop she'd swing by for a slice of lemon cake. It all seemed so ordinary, so safe. Then came the sound, gravel grinding under heavy tires. A patrol SUV's down the hill, white paint cut with blue stripes, engine humming too low for comfort. Doors slammed. Out stepped Officer Cole Rains, thick-set, sunburned neck, the kind of stare that makes you explain yourself before you've done a thing. Beside him, rookie Anna Patel fumbled with her notepad, the radio clutched tight like a question. She didn't yet know how to ask. "Stop right there," Rains barked, flat and hard. "Hands where I can see 'em." Naira slowed, palms open, sweat slick across them. She stepped to the shoulder, leaving space in old habit, drilled into her by more warnings than she could count. Move slow. Announce everything. Live to finish. "The run. I live up on Orchid Hill," she said evenly. "This is my regular route. I'll reach for my ID slowly, if that's all right." "Got reports of a suspicious subject," Rains shot back. His eyes ran down her frame, settling too long on the running belt at her waist. "You match the description." The description. Those words always felt like a trap. Common, casual, but deadly in the wrong moment. Naira felt her throat tighten, like sprinting uphill without air. She nodded once, clear and measured. "I'm reaching into my pouch, pulling out my phone, keys, slim wallet, placing them on your hood." Patel's glance said, "Go ahead, I see you." But Rains had already stepped close, enough for her to see the vein in his neck ticking faster than it should. She set the items down. Neat as evidence. Phone, keys, wallet. Rains flipped the wallet open, lips curling at what he saw. Or didn't see. "Fake IDs are easy these days," he muttered, more to the trees than to her. "Name?" "It's right there," she said. "Turn around. Hands behind your head." From the corner of her eye, the baker froze with her paper sack. A high schooler in neon shoes slowed, phone half raised. The old fisherman by the dock looked up, line sagging into the lake. Each of them caught in that uneasy space between witness and bystander. Naira turned, fingers laced. The cuffs clicked shut, one wrist, then the other. The metallic snap cracked through the morning like a gunshot. Birds exploded from the brush, dots of black scattering against the gray sky. Inside the SUV, the air was thick, burnt coffee stale. Patel sat stiff, color drained from her face. "Officer," She said she lives here. This isn't training class. Rains cut her off. He keyed the mic like a man hammering nails. Suspicious subject in custody, possible burglary suspect. Transporting to station. Nira leaned her temple against the glass, the chill biting her skin. From the corner of her pouch she caught sight of something Rains had missed. Another wallet, older, thinner, leather worn smooth. She kept silent. Some truths she knew became fuel for the wrong fire if you spoke them too soon. Halcyon Ridge's station was an old brick post office repurposed, badly low ceilings, flickering fluorescents, the stale mix of damp paper and burnt coffee clinging to every surface dot at the front desk. Sergeant Jude Serrano looked up from her monitor, lines etched deep around eyes that had seen too many reports and not enough truth. Charges? Failure to comply, suspicious behavior, possible burglary. Rains rattled off, setting Nira's wallet down like proof already sealed. Occupation? Serrano asked, gaze cutting back to Naira. If I told you, Naira asked quietly, would you believe me? Before Serrano could answer, Patel slipped in carrying the pouch. She placed it carefully on the counter, unzipped, and drew out the thin leather wallet. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from knowing. She flipped it open. The badge caught the light. Not gaudy, not fake. Solid, burnished, stamped with words that silenced the room. Federal Bureau of Investigation. For a beat, every sound broke. The printer jammed mid-line. A chair squeaked and stopped. Someone cleared a throat and choked on the air. Special Agent Naira Cole, she said evenly. Civil Rights Division. Badge number 7Q613. Rains lunged for the badge, but she didn't flinch. She only lifted her chin an inch, setting the weight of her name down on the room. Serrano's eyes narrowed. She set her coffee aside, slid the cuff key across the desk. Unlock her. The pause from Rains lasted longer than it should have. Then the cuffs clattered loose. Red marks ringed her wrists, angry circles that told a story sharper than any report could. I want, Nira said, voice clipped, a full copy of this morning's radio logs. Every second of body cam footage, and the complete record of all suspicious person calls from the past 30 days. And I want a private room. Patel's voice cracked through the silence. My body cam's been rolling the whole time. She glanced down, guilty and determined all at once. Serrano gave her the smallest nod. Bring it all, the sergeant ordered. No cuts, no gaps. She turned back to Nira. And what then? Nira steadied her breathing. Then tonight, we open the Orpheum Theater. Not for speeches, for testimony. People deserve to be heard. Serrano leaned back, half a smile tugging her mouth, as if surprised to remember what hope looked like. That old place hasn't had all its lights on in years. Maybe tonight's the night. Outside, the crowd was already growing, phones raised, voices buzzing. Inside, the body cam beeped as the first file loaded. And somewhere across town, a janitor tested the switch at the Orpheum. The bulbs flickered, coughed, then burned a wake-throwing light on a stage that hadn't mattered in decades. For Halcyon Ridge, this wasn't going to be a routine report. It was the start of something that couldn't be stuffed back into a drawer. The Orpheum had been dead for years. Its marquee still carried the ghost of a movie title from a decade ago. The letters half fallen, the bulbs long burned out. Most nights it was just another hollow shell on Main Street, a backdrop people forgot to look at. But by dusk that day, the place pulsed again, its windows glowing, its old velvet curtains shaken free of dust. Someone had hauled folding chairs onto the stage. Volunteers set out thermoses of coffee, a tray of sweet rolls from the bakery, paper cups stacked high like a makeshift communion. The smell of cinnamon and lemon drifted down the aisles, but no one was thinking of food. They were waiting. By 7, the house was packed. Shopkeepers, high school kids, the pastor from New Hope Baptist with his collar undone, A few officers still in uniform, arms crossed but present. And neighbors white, black, Latino, old, young, all jammed shoulder to shoulder in the velvet. Seats buzzing with something between outrage and expectation. On stage, under the hard yellow wash of work lights, Sergeant Serrano adjusted a microphone that squealed before it settled. "All right," she said, voice rasping like gravel. "This is not a trial. It's not theater. This is testimony. You've got something to say, you'll say it. Everyone else will listen. No shouting anyone down, understood?" The murmur of assent rose, uneven but real. Then she stepped aside. The first voice was Alicia Ramirez, who owned the coffee shop on Birch. She gripped the mic like she'd never held one before, yet her words came hot and steady. "2 months ago, my husband got stopped driving home from closing shift. Still in his apron. They made him sit on the curb while people drove by. His only crime was brown skin in the wrong neighborhood, no ticket, no apology, just humiliation." A ripple moved through the audience, low, angry, familiar. Next was a lanky teenager in a football hoodie. "Coach tells me I'm fast," he said, eyes darting. "But every time a cruiser slows down, I wonder if running just makes me a bigger target." His words cracked at the end. People clapped anyway, not to cheer, but to keep him from drowning in silence. Story after story poured out. An older black man spoke of being frisked on his own porch. A nurse described her husband in scrubs getting followed through the grocery aisles. A teacher said she spent more time explaining how to survive a traffic stop than she did teaching algebra. Each voice stacked on the last, a brick in a wall that had been invisible until tonight. When the hush finally came, it was Naira's turn. She stood without hurry, still in her running gear, badge clipped at her side, her wrists faintly bruised but her stance unshaken. She didn't reach for the mic right away. She let the silence breathe until people leaned forward, waiting. "My name is Naira Cole," she began. "Some of you know me from the video. Some of you have seen me running this hill every Saturday. I'm both those people. I'm also an FBI agent. I've spent my career trying to make justice more than a word on paper. And yesterday, I was reminded that a badge doesn't always protect you when skin is the thing on trial." Her voice didn't rise, but the weight of it carried across the theater. A camera clicked. Someone sniffled. I was cuffed in daylight. Not for a crime, not for evidence, but for a description. A description that's followed me since I was a kid. And I knew, in that moment, I wasn't just running for my health. I was running from a history that keeps chasing us all. She paused, let it sink. My story made headlines because of my badge. Most stories don't. They just disappear into silence. Tonight, I don't want silence. I want 5 things. She raised her hand, fingers splayed. 1. Open every complaint. Don't bury them. 2. Retrain every officer, not once, but yearly. 3. Put body cams on every uniform and release the footage. 4. Create a board of citizens with the power to hold this department accountable. 5. Start treating every neighbor as exactly that, a neighbor, not a suspect. The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, people began to count with her. 1, 2, 4, 5. The sound rolled through the theater, low at first, then swelling until it filled every corner. A chant, a vow, something raw and newly born. From the wings, Patel stood stiff, body cam still strapped to her vest. She didn't step forward, but she didn't step back either. Her eyes glistened. Rains wasn't there, his absence loud as a slammed door. Naira lowered her hand. "This isn't about vengeance," she said. "It's about building a place where my little brother doesn't flinch at blue lights. Where kids can run fast without wondering if it makes them targets. Where we all get to go home safe." Applause broke uneven, then thunderous. Some stood, some cried, some simply nodded. But the Orpheum had never heard anything so alive in decades. In the back row, the baker who'd waved that morning whispered to her daughter, Remember this night. Remember her voice. By the time the meeting spilled into the street, Maine was crowded. TV vans beamed live shots. Strangers hugged neighbors they'd barely spoken to before. A homemade banner stretched across the streetlights. Running is not a crime. At the station, Chief Wilson watched on a muted screen, jaw tight. He'd been chief for 7 years, long enough to know when a tide had shifted beyond his control. Serrano came in with tired eyes and a cup of stale coffee. "You see this?" she asked. He nodded. "We're not putting this back in the box." "Then what?" He looked at the screen one more time, the image of Nera on stage, hand lifted like a beacon. "Then we stop pretending. Tomorrow we meet her halfway. Or we don't meet her at all." Outside, the Orpheum lights blazed brighter than anyone remembered. Kids danced on the steps, teenagers live-streamed. Elders shook hands with cops who had finally shown up to listen. And at the center, Nera stood with her mother on one side, and Patel a few steps behind her, both women lit by the glow of bulbs that had been dead for years. The town was awake now, and nothing was going back to sleep. The next morning, before the sun had finished rinsing the rooftops in pale orange, the park trail was crowded in a way no one had ever seen. Halcyon Ridge had woken up restless, unable to go back to the illusion of calm. Word had spread faster than gossip ever could. Meet at dawn. Run with Nera. She hadn't called for it. She hadn't posted or texted or rallied. Yet they came. First, the joggers who knew her routine. Then mothers with strollers, teens with earbuds dangling, veterans in ball caps, church elders with stiff knees but determined strides. The baker from Maine carried a tray of muffins, handing them out like communion. Alicia from the coffee shop poured paper cups of hot brew from a giant thermos. Steam rising in the cold dot by 6, the path wasn't a loop anymore. It was a river of bodies flowing in rhythm, carrying one message: we belong here. Nera laced her sneakers by the park bench, still sore from the bruises at her wrists. Brenda stood beside her, scarf knotted tight, pressing an orange slice into her palm the way she used to before middle school track meets. "Eat," her mother said. "Run with strength, not anger." Andre was already jogging backward with his phone held high, live streaming. His voice rang out over the crowd. "Maplewood, this is what change looks like." The comments flew in. Hearts, fists, fire emojis, words from strangers in cities Nera had never visited. "We see you. We're with you." Darius jogged up, sweat already shining on his forehead, flashing a grin that said, "We're not alone anymore." When Nera stepped onto the path, the crowd shifted, closing ranks around her. She took the first strides. Steady, even, her breathing deep, her chest tight with something larger than fear. The sound of hundreds of sneakers pounding earth blended into a thunder she felt in her bones. Halfway around the lake, a reporter jogged alongside, microphone in hand, panting with each step. "Agent Cole, what do you hope happens next?" She slowed just enough to answer, sweat streaking her temple. "I hope this is the day we stopped running from the past and started running toward a future where everyone is safe." The applause that broke out wasn't clapping. It was the stomp of feet hitting gravel harder, faster, louder. By the time they finished, the field by the playground was alive with people catching their breath, passing out fruit, hugging strangers. Kids sat cross-legged chalking messages on the blacktop. "Justice is for everyone. Run free." A girl no older than 7 pressed a drawing into Nera's hand-stick figures holding hands under a blue sky. The words scrawled in crayon. "Thank you for being brave." Nera crouched, eye level with the girl. "You're brave too," she whispered. "Don't forget that." Across town, the oversight board held its first meeting inside City Hall. They'd expected a handful of attendees. Instead, residents flooded the lobby, spilling into hallways. Folding chairs ran out within minutes. Someone rigged a speaker so the crowd outside could hear. Chief Wilson walked in without his uniform. Just a shirt and slacks, sleeves rolled up. Some booed, others stayed silent, but he didn't leave. He sat down at the table with Serrano on one side and a retired judge on the other. For the first time in years, people felt the department wasn't shielded behind locked doors. Inside, testimony continued. Teachers demanded data. Mothers demanded body cams. A high school quarterback demanded, "Stop calling us suspects for being fast." Naira arrived mid-session, her badge clipped at her hip, but her face still damp from the run. She didn't speak at first. She sat in the back row, listening. She wanted the town's voices to be louder than her own. When finally asked for comment, she stood and said simply, "This isn't about me, it's about all of us. I don't want a headline. I want a habit. A system that treats dignity like oxygen, something every person is entitled to breathe." Reporters scribbled, cameras rolled, but what mattered most was the nods, slow, deep nods from neighbors who had carried these stories in silence for years. That evening, the story leapt from local news to national. Cable anchors debated the footage of her arrest, then replayed the chants from the Orpheum, then cut live to the run around the lake. Headlines scrolled, "FBI agent detained by local police, sparks movement." By nightfall, calls poured into Maplewood from Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles. Other towns wanted to hold their own runs, their own forums. Twitter trended, #RunWithNaira. At home, Brenda stirred a pot of collard greens while Andre fielded messages on his laptop. "Detroit's planning a solidarity run," he announced. "St. Louis too. They're calling it the Simone effect." Naira, exhausted, sore, but awake in a way she'd never been, leaned against the kitchen counter. "This was never supposed to be about me," she murmured. Brenda slid a steaming bowl in front of her. "Maybe not. But someone had to start the run." Later that night, standing at her bedroom window, Naira looked out across the town she'd grown up in. Candles flickered in the park. Chalk slogans glowed faintly under the street lamps. For once, the silence didn't feel like hiding. It felt like catching breath between strides, and she knew tomorrow they'd lace up again. By the third day, Maplewood no longer felt like a quiet town. Satellite trucks lined Main Street like carnival rides, their dishes pointed skyward. Reporters paced the sidewalks rehearsing live shots. Out-of-state plates clogged parking lots. The cafe on Birch stayed open 20 hours a day, its windows fogged with conversations about reform. Inside City Hall, a folding sign pointed toward the auditorium, "Oversight hearing, public welcome." The lettering looked temporary, but the line of residents outside proved it wasn't going away. Chief Wilson sat stiff at the long table on stage, flanked by Serrano and a DOJ observer in a navy suit. In the center sat Judge Eleanor McBride, retired, but sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who could silence a room with a glance. The oversight board had been sworn in only 48 hours earlier, yet the hall was already packed with townsfolk ready to see if it had teeth. And at the far end of the table, under fluorescent lights that made him look paler than ever, sat Officer Cole Raines, civilian clothes, no badge, no weapon. Just hands clasped so tight, his knuckles looked like chalk. The murmurs quieted when McBride tapped the mic. "This isn't a trial. It's a public reckoning. Every voice here matters. We are here to listen, record, and chart a path forward." She nodded toward the front row. "Ms. Wright, you asked to speak first." Alicia rose from her seat, apron still dusted with flour from the cafe. Her voice carried with unexpected strength. "I watched this town shrug for years. Watched neighbors treated like suspects. I baked bread for officers who never looked me in the eye. But last week, I watched a woman in handcuffs stand taller than this whole department. We're not here to punish one man. We're here to make sure it never happens again." Applause rippled, restrained but fierce. Next came a schoolteacher. Then a teenager who had been stopped walking home in his football jersey. Then an elderly veteran who said, "I fought for freedoms I still haven't seen honored on my own street." Each testimony stacked higher, a tower of lived truth impossible. to knock down. When Rains finally spoke, his voice cracked. I thought I was doing my job. We had reports. I saw someone who fit the description. I let fear make my call, not facts. Fear isn't a defense, McBride said coolly. It's a confession. His gaze dropped. Sweat traced his temple. I was wrong, he said, louder this time. I need to own that. I cuffed an innocent woman. Worse, I cuffed a federal agent in her own neighborhood. I've hurt this community. I don't expect forgiveness, but I don't want to hide either. If stepping aside is the cost, I'll pay it. If speaking to every rookie about my mistake helps stop the next one, I'll do that too. The silence after his words was jagged. Some faces softened. Others hardened further. A few shook their heads. From the back row, Nira rose. She walked down the aisle, the bruises on her wrists faint but still visible. The crowd shifted, phones lifting, all eyes on her. She faced Rains without flinching. You didn't see me. You saw a threat. You saw a story you already believed. My badge didn't matter until it was too late. He tried to meet her gaze, but she didn't let him off easy. This community deserves more than apologies. We deserve guarantees, systems, oversight, because I don't want my neighbors to need a badge to survive a run in the park. Applause. Thundered, this time unstoppable. McBride lifted a hand, waiting for quiet. The board's recommendation, a full review of every complaint against Officer Rains, past and present. Community members will sit on the panel. Transparency will be the rule, not the exception. She turned to him. Your badge is revoked. Your future here is a choice between silence or service without a gun. Decide carefully. Rains nodded, shoulders sagging as though the air itself pressed him down. I'll serve, he whispered. Chief Wilson stood next. His voice shook but carried weight. For years I told myself we were protecting Maplewood. The truth is, we were protecting ourselves. That ends today. Every stop, every use of force, every arrest will be reviewed independently. Effective. Immediately. The hall erupted, cheers, shouts, sobs dotted the aisle. Andre streamed live, his phone vibrating with comments from across the country. Brooklyn watching. Houston with you. Keep going. Mayra returned to her seat beside her mother. Brenda squeezed her hand, whispering, You didn't just speak for yourself. You spoke for all of us. Rachel Evans from the FBI leaned forward, eyes burning with pride. Washington's watching, she murmured. And they're not just watching. They're taking notes. Outside, the plaza was packed. Candles flickered. In daylight, banners stretched across the lawn. Choirs sang freedom songs that spilled into every side street. Reporters shouted questions, but the sound that carried wasn't microphones. It was the chant rising from every throat. Justice. For all. Justice for Maplewood. That night, in the quiet of her townhouse, Naira sat at the kitchen table with her badge resting between her palms. The town wasn't healed. It wasn't safe yet. But for the first time, she believed change wasn't just a slogan on a banner. It was a promise written in voices too loud to ignore. She whispered to herself, not as an oath, but as a reminder. Tomorrow we keep running. The fourth dawn after her arrest broke with an unusual sound. Silence. No lawnmowers, no cars gunning. Down Main Street. Just the steady hush of a town catching its breath after 3 days of shouting. But the silence didn't last. By mid-morning, the world came knocking. The first call was from Detroit. A youth organizer asked if Maplewood could share its oversight. Charter. They wanted to copy it word for word. Next came Atlanta church leaders planning a justice run through downtown, inviting Nira to speak by livestream. Then Chicago, Dallas, even a small town in Georgia. All asking the same thing. How did you do it? How do we start? Andre, eyes bloodshot from 2 sleepless nights, fielded calls like a campaign manager. They're calling it the Simone effect. He told her, half laughing, half exhausted. Hashtags are everywhere. Look. He flipped his laptop toward her, showing a flood of posts. Kids in t-shirts scrawled with "Run Free." Families holding homemade banners, entire crowds jogging across. Bridges and boulevards. Nira pressed her fingers to her temples. I didn't ask for this. Brenda set a plate of cornbread on the table. Nobody ever asks, baby. But sometimes the world asks for you. That afternoon, Maplewood held its second Unity Run. This time, there were 5 times as many people. They came from nearby counties, spilling out of vans and carpools. An elderly couple drove 4 hours just to lace up. Students from Howard University arrived wearing sweatshirts like armor. The trail around the lake throbbed with motion. Drums beat from the far end, a marching band volunteering without invitation. Kids waved flags painted with Nira's outline mid-stride. Darius led chants between gulps of air. And Nira, though her legs ached and her lungs begged for rest, kept her pace. She knew stopping now would feel like breaking a promise. Reporters jogged along, recording every breath. At one point, a cameraman stumbled, and 3 teenagers caught his gear before it hit the ground. The crowd laughed, then cheered. For once, the story wasn't humiliation, it was strength. When they finished, sweaty and gasping on the grass, Chief Wilson arrived in plain clothes again. He didn't take the stage or call for attention. He simply moved among the crowd, listening, answering questions, taking notes in a battered leather pad. Someone shouted, "Chief, are you just playing politics?" He looked up, voice gravelly but steady. "No, I'm trying to learn." "And if that's politics, then I'll take it." The crowd didn't cheer. But they didn't boo either. For Wilson, that was progress. By evening, Maplewood's story dominated national broadcasts. Anchors used phrases like historic shift and grassroots reckoning. Panels of pundits argued about federal oversight, police unions, and systemic reform. But between all the noise, the same images replayed. Nira's wrists red with cuff marks. Nira standing tall at the Orpheum. Nira running at the front of a crowd. She became a symbol overnight. And it frightened her. Late that night, Rachel Evans arrived from Washington. She found Nira on the porch, shoes kicked off, head bent over her phone. Messages flooded her inbox: old classmates, strangers, parents describing their children's fear. One reads simply, "Because of you, my son believes he'll grow up safe." Rachel sat beside her. "You know the director wants you in D.C. by next week, right? They're asking for testimony before Congress." Nira didn't look up. "What? If I'm not the right one?" "You are," Rachel said firmly. "But it's not about being perfect. It's about being present. You've already changed Maplewood. Now they want to know if the country can change too." The thought pressed on Nira like weight she hadn't trained for. She closed her eyes, hearing again the cuffs snap shut. The laughter of kids chasing each other in the park, the roar of hundreds of sneakers pounding earth in unison. "I never wanted to be a symbol," she whispered. Rachel's voice softened. "Symbols don't get to choose, but people do. And right now, they're choosing you." The next morning, Maplewood High School held an assembly. Students crowded the gym bleachers, buzzing like a hive. Teachers expected chaos, but when Nira walked in, the room fell still. She stood at half court, no podium, no mic. Just her voice. "I'm not here to tell you what to think," she began. "I'm here to remind you what you already know. You deserve to live without fear. You deserve to walk home safe. You deserve to run fast and never wonder if it makes you a suspect." The gym erupted: cheers, stomps, claps echoing off the rafters. A sophomore quarterback wiped tears from his face. A girl in band uniform clutched her friend's hand. Teachers exchanged glances, some whispering, "This is what we should have taught all along." That night, solidarity vigils bloomed across the country. Photos poured in. Candles along the Detroit River, choirs singing in Atlanta, teens chalking sidewalks in Dallas. Everywhere, voices lifted the same refrain: run free. From her bedroom window, Nira watched Maplewood's own vigil stretch down Main. Hundreds of candles, hundreds of faces turned upward. She heard them singing "A Change Is Gonna Come." Same song her mother had hummed when she was a child. Brenda joined her at the window, arms slipping around her daughter's shoulders. "Do you see it now?" she asked. Nira swallowed hard. "Yeah, I see it." And though her body trembled with exhaustion, she felt something else rise, stronger resolve. Tomorrow she would lace her shoes again. Not just for herself, not just for Maplewood, but for every town waiting for someone to take the first stride. The marble halls of Washington didn't feel anything like Maplewood. They smelled of polish and old air, humming with the footsteps of aides rushing between offices. Reporters waited at every corner, badges clipped to their jackets, hungry for a headline. Nira Cole walked beside Rachel Evans, her badge heavy on her hip, her mother's voice in her ear even from hundreds of miles away. "Don't shrink, don't shout. Just stand." The congressional hearing chamber was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Representatives adjusted their microphones. Some looked tired, others combative, but all were alert. The name placard before her read Agent Nira Cole, Federal Bureau of Investigation. She took her seat. Her heart thudded, but her face was steady. The chairman cleared his throat. "Agent Cole, thank you for appearing today. We've all seen the footage of your detention in Maplewood. The country has seen it. We'd like to hear in your words what happened." Nira leaned forward, her voice calm, measured. "I was running in my neighborhood. I was stopped. I was cuffed. I was humiliated in front of my community, not for what I did, but for how I looked. My badge didn't matter until it was too late. And the truth is, I'm one of the lucky ones because I had a badge at all." Gasps rippled across the room. Pens scratched dot, she continued. "What happened to me isn't new. It's not rare. It's the story of millions who don't make headlines. But Maplewood showed something important. When people demand accountability, when they organize, when they refuse silence, change begins. We need policies that don't wait for the next viral video." One congresswoman asked, "What do you propose?" "Agent Cole?" Nira lifted a sheet of paper, the same 5 demands she had listed at the Orpheum. Her voice didn't tremble. Transparency, retraining, body cameras, independent oversight, and respect. These aren't radical ideas. They're the bare minimum for justice. Some lawmakers nodded. Others frowned, calculating costs and politics. But the words were spoken, broadcast live, and already streaming across every phone in the country. When the hearing adjourned, reporters swarmed. "Agent Cole, are you planning a lawsuit? Will you run for office? Are you the new face of reform?" She kept walking, Rachel shielding her flank. "I'm not here for politics," Nira said over her shoulder. "I'm here for people." Back in Maplewood, the changes had already begun to dig roots. The Oversight Board released its first set of reforms: open complaint records, mandatory retraining, and monthly public forums. For the first time, citizens could see data once locked. Behind closed doors out at the police station, Chief Wilson gathered his officers in the briefing room. No uniforms, no weapons. "Just people. We're done hiding," he told them. "If you can't accept these changes, hand in your badge. If you can, then let's rebuild trust one block at a time." Some officers bristled. A few walked out, but others stayed, listening. A rookie named Terrence raised his hand. "I joined this job to help, not to harm. I'm in. But I'm going to hold every one of us accountable, including myself." It wasn't applause that followed, but a heavy nod from the room, the kind of agreement that mattered more. Meanwhile, Officer Cole Raines was no longer Officer Raines. He had resigned, the ink still wet on his letter. Yet instead of disappearing, he began showing up where no one expected: schools, Community centers, even youth basketball practices. One afternoon, he stood before a classroom of 10th graders, shoulders hunched, voice low. I let fear decide for me. And that fear almost destroyed someone's life. Don't repeat my mistake. Don't let bias steer your choices. Own your wrongs before they own you. Some students rolled their eyes. Others listened wide-eyed. One girl raised her hand. Do you think people can change? Rames hesitated. I'm trying to prove it, he said. Word spread. Some in town refused to forgive him, crossing the street when they saw him. Others began to nod in passing, not absolution, but acknowledgement. Slowly, awkwardly, he carved a path not back into authority, but into humility. At Alicia's cafe, the air buzzed every night. Flyers for Know Your Rights clinics covered the walls. Teenagers huddled with laptops planning voter drives. Elders swapped stories over mugs of coffee, their voices finally heard. The cafe had become Maplewood's unofficial town hall. Nara visited often, slipping in quietly, but she was never invisible anymore. People lined up to thank her, to share their stories, to hand her notes scribbled on napkins. You gave us hope. My daughter wants to be an agent now. Each word was heavy, a burden she hadn't chosen. Yet she carried it, because to set it down would mean betraying the trust they'd placed in her. One night, Brenda found her slumped at the kitchen table. Papers spread around, phone buzzing nonstop. Baby, her mother said gently, you can't fix the whole world in one night. Nira rubbed her temples. But if I stop, it feels like everything we fought for will slip away. Brenda cupped her daughter's face, eyes full of pride and sorrow. You started the run, now let others keep the pace. That's how movements last. Weeks later, Maplewood hosted the first Run for Justice Summit. Leaders from across the country arrived, activists from Detroit, pastors from Atlanta, student groups from Chicago. They filled the park, marching bands and choirs blending with the thrum of sneakers on gravel. The summit wasn't speeches alone. It was workshops on policy, youth panels on organizing, mothers trading strategies for keeping their kids safe. Maplewood glowed with tents, tables, murals painted by teenagers. Justice lives here. Nira took the stage only once, her words short but searing. Justice isn't a destination, it's a road. Some days are uphill, some days you trip. But you keep going. And the more people run beside you, the farther you'll all get. The crowd roared. And in that roar, Nira felt something shift. She was no longer running alone. That night, as the summit wound down and the last choir packed up, Nira walked the path around the lake one more time. The lanterns strung between trees glowed like fireflies. Children's laughter echoed off. The water. Darius jogged beside her, grinning. Think you'll ever stop running? She shook her head. Not as long as there's someone behind me who needs the road cleared. Brenda waited at the finish line, arms open like she had years ago. Nira slowed, then ran into her embrace. For the first time in weeks, the tightness in her chest eased. Maplewood wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it had become something more than it was proof that when truth is spoken, when neighbors stand together, when fear is met with courage, a small town can teach the nation how to move forward. And as the moon lit the trail, Nira whispered to herself, to her family, to her town, and to anyone watching from far away, keep going. I'll run with you every step of the way. Spring settled over Maplewood with a softness no one trusted at first. The dogwoods bloomed, the farmer's market reopened, and the air smelled of cut grass and cinnamon rolls from Alicia's cafe. But underneath the familiar rhythm of small-town life, something had shifted for good. Everywhere you looked, reminders of the reckoning lingered. Flyers for the Oversight Board's monthly forums hung in grocery store windows. Kids wore shirts that read, "We Run Together." The town's website featured a new hotline banner, "Report stops, share stories. Be heard." For once, the words weren't just decoration. People actually used them. At Maplewood Elementary, Principal Franklin stood in front of a cafeteria packed with parents and said words no one expected from a school leader. We're not only teaching math and reading. We're teaching rights. Your kids will leave here knowing what to do if stopped, who to call, and how to stand up for each other. The room erupted in applause. Some parents cried. A grandmother whispered, "Finally." Police life changed. 2. Gone were the endless patrol cars circling neighborhoods like sharks. Instead, officers walked the beat, sometimes in pairs, sometimes alongside oversight board members. One Saturday morning, Olivia Green, the young officer who'd once stayed silent during Rain's outbursts, strolled down Birch Street with Terrence, the rookie who'd spoken up in the briefing room. Kids on bikes followed them, peppering them with questions. "Do you still carry guns?" one boy asked. "Yes," Terrence answered, "but more important, we carry ears. We're here to listen." The boy blinked. Nobody ever said that before. By evening, that boy was bragging to his mother, "The cops listened to me." A small thing. But in Maplewood, small things had become proof that bigger change was possible. Cole Raines, meanwhile, lived in the uncomfortable spotlight of a man both condemned and curious. Stripped of his badge, he volunteered with Darius and Andres' new youth collective, Second Chances. At first, the teens heckled him. "What's next, Raines?" "Teaching us how to get cuffed faster." He didn't argue. He let the words sting, then kept showing up. He picked up trash after every run, swept the gym floor after practices, even bought pizza without asking for credit. Weeks in, he stood before a group of seniors at Maplewood High, sweat dampening his shirt collar. "You've all seen my mistake. You've seen me at my worst. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Bias destroys. It destroys trust, careers, sometimes lives. Don't let it live unchecked in you." A long silence followed. Then a girl in the back row whispered, "At least he said it." That whisper was more than Raines deserved. But it was also the seed of something Maplewood hadn't seen from its officers before: honest reckoning. Alicia's cafe thrummed every night, the hum of activism woven into the smell of espresso. Teens planned marches in one corner, elders debated scripture in another, and the middle tables belonged to the oversight board, scribbling policies on napkins. The cafe's hope jar, once half empty, overflowed with folded slips of paper. One read, "I want my daughter to be safe walking home." Another, "We need jobs for kids after school." A third, scrawled in shaky handwriting, "I forgive, but I don't forget." Alicia read them aloud on Friday nights. The whole cafe listened. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they cried. Always they clapped after the last slip, sealing the week with applause. For Nera, ordinary life returned in fragments. Morning runs at the lake. Late-night phone calls with Rachel. Sunday suppers with Brenda, who never let her daughter skip dessert anymore. But she also carried a new weight. Every day, letters arrived, some praising her, others pleading, "Come speak in our town. Help us build what you built." She knew she couldn't answer them all, but she tried. One evening, after a long day of phone calls, she laced her shoes and slipped out for a quiet run. But halfway around the lake, she heard footsteps behind her. A group of children had joined, backpacks bouncing, sneakers untied. "Can we run with you, Miss Cole?" one asked. She grinned, nodding. "Only if you can keep up." Laughter echoed through the trees as they sprinted together, free, unafraid. The reforms began showing up in numbers, not just stories. Complaints against the police dropped. Community meetings filled to capacity. Even crime rates, once cited as a reason for aggressive patrols, leveled off. Reporters returned, skeptical at first, then stunned. National headlines read, "From crisis to model, Maplewood's path to reform." At a televised panel in Atlanta, Nero was asked, "Do you think this will last? Or is Maplewood just a moment?" She answered the way Brenda had taught her. Justice isn't a speech, it's a habit. And habits last as long as we keep practicing them. The crowd cheered. But the people who mattered most were the ones back home, the ones who carried those habits into classrooms, streets, kitchens, and churches. On a warm spring evening, the Jacksons hosted a neighborhood barbecue. Smoke curled from the grill. Children played tag in the yard. Brenda hummed gospel hymns while flipping cornbread in cast iron. Neighbors crowded the porch dais. Alicia, Rachel, even Rains lurking awkwardly at the edges. Andre live-streamed, narrating like a talk show host. This is what community looks like, y'all. Later, as twilight painted the sky purple, lanterns were lit across the yard. Voices blended old hymns, new rap, laughter, quiet tears. Nira stood at the edge of it all, watching. Brenda joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. Remember that first run, when you thought you were alone? Nira nodded, eyes on the children chasing fireflies. Her mother smiled softly. Look now, see how many are running with you. Lanterns floated upward, glowing against the night. Sky, Maplewood shimmered below, imperfect, scarred, but awake. And for the first time since that Saturday morning in the park, Nira believed the town had not just changed, it had learned how to keep changing. She whispered to herself, the promise she'd carried since cuffs snapped on her wrists, keep going. I'll run with you every step of the way. Summer rolled in heavy, with air so thick you could almost drink it. But Maplewood didn't slow down. If anything, the heat only fueled the energy. The Saturday Unity runs had become ritual, part protest, part parade, part family reunion. Folks showed up with strollers, church choirs, homemade lemonade, even barbers offering free haircuts under pop-up tents. One morning, as Nira laced her shoes on the porch, Andre burst through the screen door, phone in hand. Look at this. Across his screen scrolled videos from other cities: Detroit, Dallas, Atlanta, St. Louis. Crowds running together, chanting "Run Free." Kids holding up homemade badges with justice scribbled across them in crayon. Parents jogging with toddlers on their shoulders. They're calling it the Justice Road Collective, Andre said breathlessly. And they want Maplewood to host the first national meeting. Nira sat back on the step, stunned. National? Yeah. Delegations from a dozen cities, maybe more. They're asking you to chair it. Brenda, standing in the doorway with her apron dusted in flour, shook her head in awe. From one run in a park to this. Baby, you lit a fire. A month later, the old Maplewood Gymnasium looked like a convention hall. Folding tables crowded with flyers. Murals painted by local teens hung from the rafters. Hands clasped, sneakers mid-stride. The words, "We belong here." Delegates streamed in, teachers, pastors, lawyers, bus drivers, students. They came carrying stories and demands, all woven from the same thread. We want to be safe in our own skin. At the front of the gym, a long table faced the crowd. Nira sat at its center, flanked by Rachel on one side and Judge McBride on the other. Brenda insisted on opening the summit with a prayer. Her voice trembled, but the words rang clear. Lord, guide our feet as we run this race, not just for ourselves, but for the ones coming after. Applause thundered. The summit began. The first speaker was a pastor from Atlanta. He told of boys frisked on the way to choir practice. A mother from Dallas described her husband, a doctor, being pulled over in scrubs. A teenager from Detroit said bluntly, "I'm tired of surviving. I want to live." Each story drew murmurs, tears, clenched fists. But then came solutions. Oversight boards with real power. Mandatory community liaisons. Youth councils to review. School policing. When it was Nira's turn, she stood slowly, the room already leaning in. Maplewood isn't perfect, she said. We still have work to do. But we learned something. Change isn't a miracle, it's a decision. Every day, you choose whether to look away or to step forward. We stepped forward. You can too. Her words weren't fiery. They didn't need to be. They were steady, like footsteps hitting pavement, carrying everyone forward. Outside the gym, news crews swarmed. The summit trended online within hours. Hashtags spread like sparks. Hashtag Justice Road. Hashtag Run Free. Hashtag Maplewood modeled at the White House. Called, then Congress, then cities from coast to coast. Some wanted advice. Others wanted the spotlight. But for once, the narrative didn't belong to Washington. It belonged to towns like Maplewood. Meanwhile, life at home kept weaving new patterns. Raines continued volunteering, speaking to kids about bias and mistakes. At first, parents resisted. But when a video of him admitting, "I cuffed the wrong person because I let fear decide," went viral, the conversation changed. Some still spat his name. Others muttered, "At least he owned it." Darius launched a youth mentorship program, pairing teens with community leaders. Alicia expanded her cafe, adding a second room just for organizing events. Andre's Media Collective broadcast stories weekly, giving Maplewood's youth a louder voice than ever. Even Chief Wilson, once skeptical, now walked the streets in plain clothes, listening more than he spoke. One evening, he stopped at Brenda's porch and said quietly, "Your daughter made me see what I refused to. I'll spend the rest of my career proving I heard her." Brenda only nodded. "We'll hold you to it." The Justice Road Collective grew. By fall, 50 towns had joined. They shared strategies, victories, even failures. Some faced backlash lawsuits, pushback from unions, angry town halls. But with Maplewood as proof, no one could say reform was impossible. Nara traveled occasionally, speaking at forums, visiting schools, walking through neighborhoods that reminded her of home. But she always returned to Maplewood, to her morning runs, to the cafe, to her mother's cornbread cooling on the counter. One night, after a long day of calls, she sat on the porch with Brenda, Andre, Darius, and Rachel. The air buzzed with cicadas. Lanterns flickered in yards up and down the street. "Do you ever wonder how long this will last?" Andre asked. Nara thought about it, then answered, "As long as people keep running." That's the trick. Not speed, not distance. Just refusing to stop. Rachel raised her glass of lemonade. To refusing to stop. They clinked glasses under the starlight. Months later, Congress invited Nara back, not to testify this time, but to advise. She sat across from lawmakers drafting national guidelines modeled on Maplewood's reforms, body cams, public complaint databases, community review panels. She spoke plainly, the way Brenda had taught her. Don't wait for the next tragedy. Don't wait for the next Simone, the next Nara. Do it now. Some lawmakers shifted uncomfortably, but others nodded, pens scribbling. Change was no longer a dream, it was ink drying on paper. On the anniversary of that Saturday morning in the park, Maplewood held a candlelight run. Hundreds gathered at dawn, the sky blushing pink. Nara wore the same Howard University shirt she'd worn that day. Her wrists still carried faint scars from the cuffs, but now they felt less like wounds and more like reminders. As the run began, voices rose, chants, songs, laughter. Children sprinted ahead, teenagers jogged behind, elders walked with steady dignity. Nara ran at the center, surrounded, lifted, no longer alone. At the halfway point, a young girl tugged her sleeve. "Miss Cole, do you think it'll ever be fair for all of us?" Nara slowed, looking at her. "It will, because you're asking, because you're running with me." The girl grinned, and together they surged forward. That night, Maplewood glowed with lanterns and music. Choirs sang. Poets read. Children drew chalk murals on sidewalks. Justice lives here. We run together. Keep going. From the stage, Nira looked out at her town imperfect, scarred, but awake. She thought of that morning she almost disappeared behind steel cuffs, of her mother's steady voice, of the crowd that refused to stay silent. She lifted her candle high. "We're just getting started." The crowd echoed her, a roar that shook the summer night. And somewhere, in another town not yet awakened, another runner laced their shoes, comforted by the knowledge they weren't running alone anymore. Maplewood will never be the same. What started as humiliation in a park became hope on the streets. Neighbors stood taller, officers listened harder, and a single woman's courage reminded a country that justice is not a destination, it's a road we travel together, step by step, run by run. And maybe that's the real lesson: no one runs alone. If you carry hope, someone else will carry it with you. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel and join us for more powerful journeys like this one. Together, we keep running toward change.